All right, Isaiah chapter 22. Let's call this one Shebna, a tool part 3, actually. Understanding that this chapter is going to turn its attention back towards Judah, as verses 1 through 3 are going to seem to describe God's divine justice, describing in verses 2 and 3 specifically a judgment or a defeat that's going to come without either sword or bow, describing the way that they are going to be both killed and captured in a way that seems to defy conventional wisdom. Verse 4 is going to be reminiscent of the description of the fall of Moab, where it's going to describe God executing justice on his people, but with a degree of sadness and maybe even mourning. Understanding that, as sad as he might be about the outcome for them, verses 5 through 7 are going to describe the way in which, once again, he still has a day of divine accountability, helping us to understand going forward in verses 9 through 11, really the second half of verse 8 on through 11, what that day is going to look like. Understanding that it's going to progress in a way that's going to give them enough advance warning that some of them are going to be able to prepare, or as we say in this region, they're going to be able to prep for the outcome. However, their prepping is going to be made inadequate by the fact that they are not going to consult God as to how they can adequately prep for what's actually ahead. However, the group that we see in verses 8 through 11 are going to probably be better off than what we see in verses 12 and 13, which describes a group that simply parties in preparation for what seems like an inevitable end, giving us the famous passage in verse 13, "Let us eat and drink, for tomorrow we die." Leading to verse 14's reminder that picking a path and clinging to it, whether it is the path of wisdom or folly, without consulting God, will eventually leave us stuck with the consequences of making moves that are inconsistent with the outcome he's preparing, which actually may be a great introduction to the last section of the chapter, running roughly from verse 15 on through verse 25, describing the story of Shebna, thus our title. In cross-referencing other chapters, a man who seems to have become a high official over the household of King Hezekiah, but who likewise seems to have become so self-indulgent that he might have begun to neglect the reasons why he was placed in that position in the first place. Verse 18 describing him as the shame of his master's house. The chapter going on to describe the way in which he is to be replaced by another servant, or actually another official by the name of Eliakim, who the chapter will describe as a secure peg, one who may actually be as secure as Shebna thought himself to be. This chapter giving us another chance to see the way that, much like alcohol can be described as the source of false courage, sometimes hard times can be the source of false humility. Understanding that most of the other times that I saw Shebna mentioned in the Bible, it was in connection to the way in which Hezekiah was trying to appease the king of Assyria as he was attempting to invade Judah, with quite possibly this same Shebna and Eliakim being among the men sent out to seek the terms of peace. And out of the two men, Eliakim seemed to be the only one who had a humility that endured beyond the point at which God got them out of trouble. Going back to that familiar distinction that we mentioned between personality and character. Shebna presenting the kind of personality that seemed humble when he was pressed. Eliakim, on the other hand, presenting the kind of character that seemed both humble and reliable, whether or not he was under pressure. Assyria, Babylon, and now Shebna, showing us the way in which freedom actually exposed how they couldn't be trusted. Which is why we sometimes say, my prayer for you is my prayer for me. That in a land where we value our freedoms highly, may we use our freedom to look out for one another in a way that he can actually trust.